You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. This is going to be my NBA free agency recap. I'm going to go team by team, breaking down what every team did, signings, trades, you name it. I do want to throw a little bit of a caveat into this, though. I'm just going to break down what everyone did yesterday. So the moves that happened today, the Nets bringing in James Johnson, the Raptors bringing in Sam Dekker, the Jazz bringing in Rudy Gay. I'm going to talk about those moves tomorrow. So you are going to get a second day of this. Could you get a third day? There's an outside chance of it. I mean, what else is happening in sports right now? NBA free agency is the biggest story. So I do have a list of all the moves that were made yesterday. I did not make the list myself. The list comes from hoopsrumors.com. An absolutely invaluable resource. That whole family of websites is incredible. Shout out to them. Without them, my life would be a lot more difficult. So let's not waste any time. The Atlanta Hawks made 3 moves. They signed Gorgui Dieng to a 1-year deal worth $4 million. They brought in Solomon Hill. And they signed Trae Young to a 5-year maximum salary extension. The Dieng signing makes a ton of sense. Onyeka Okongwu isn't going to be back until January at best. So the Hawks needed to bring in a center to help Clint Capella off the bench. Dieng will be fine in that role. Decent rebounder, decent interior scorer. And he'd probably be okay with sliding to the end of the bench when Okongwu comes back. So that move made a ton of sense. Solomon Hill, I wasn't as crazy about. I understand it's a 1-year deal, probably the veteran's minimum, but I'm not the biggest Solomon Hill fan. Just never thought he was that good. I don't know why the Hawks wanted to bring him back. I don't know where he's going to play. I don't know what role he fills for you. I'm not crazy about that move, but I can't kill it too much since it was just a 1-year deal, presumably on the veteran's minimum. And Trae Young signing the max extension. Yes, absolutely, you sign him to that. One of the best players in the NBA. Led you to the Eastern Conference Finals. Do I really need to go in depth on that? Good job by the Hawks in locking him up. I'll skip over the Celtics since they didn't do anything yesterday. I spoke about their 2 trades yesterday. So that brings us to my beloved Brooklyn Nets. They only made one move yesterday, bringing back Blake Griffin. They brought him back on a 1-year deal. We don't know for how much. But I said in the Nets off-season preview that I wanted Griffin back. Played a very important role for the Nets. Hit the floor for every loose ball. Proved that he could still dunk. Held his own defensively, very athletic. The Nets seem to be running it back with the same starting 5. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and Blake Griffin. Admittedly, I can't say that I have a problem with that. When you have 3 of the 15 best players in the NBA in your starting 5, you're doing something right. The one thing that may be a little concerning to Nets fans is their bench, but it seems like they're making a big push for Patty Mills. I'm not the biggest Mills fan in the world, but I understand why the Nets are bringing him in if they end up putting pen to paper with him. Veteran presence off the bench will fill the Spencer Dinwiddie role. Obviously, the Nets have a lot of Spurs connections. Mills did win an NBA title with the Spurs in 2014. The reason why I'm not crazy about him is because he's a point guard that always looks for his own shot first. He's also not the best defender in the world. But I'll say this, Mills is very durable. I wouldn't bang tables over the Nets bringing him in. I mean, who would you rather have, Patty Mills or Javon Carter? The answer is Patty Mills. If the Nets don't get Mills, Carter's the backup point guard. And I don't hate that, but I would rather have Mills. You think about the bench right now, it's Carter, Cam Thomas, Bruce Brown, James Johnson, and Nick Claxton. That's a good bench. I'll take that. But it would be made better by subtracting Carter and adding Mills. Also, the bench could get even better with the additions that the Nets are going to get from the Wizards in the Spencer Dinwiddie sign-and trade that we're going to get. We don't know what those additions are. I'll get into Dinwiddie at the end of this show. Why the end of this show, you may ask? Because Washington is the last team in the NBA alphabetically. I'll skip over the Charlotte Hornets, they didn't do anything, and go straight to the Chicago Bulls. They made a couple really big moves. They signed Lonzo Ball to a 4-year deal worth $85 million. Technically, it's going to be a sign-and-trade with the Pelicans. The Pelicans are going to get Tomas Satoransky, Garrett Temple, and a future second-rounder, but the big thing is Ball to the Bulls. And they brought in Alex Caruso on a 4-year deal worth $37 million. Let me start by saying that I'm in the wrong business. All due respect to Alex Caruso, he's a solid player. Everyone likes watching him play. Fan favorite in LA. Bulls fans are going to love him. But in no way, shape, or form should he be getting over $9 million a year. What's that song? I wish I was a baller. Wish I was a little bit taller. Yeah. Truer words have never been spoken. These role players get like $9, $10, $11 million deals per year. It's incredible. But let's talk about Lonzo. As much as I like him, and I do, I really do, I'm not sure how he fits the Bulls. You think about their starting five, it was Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, Lauri Markkanen, and Nikola Vujovic. What are you going to do? Put White on the bench? Are you going to go small? Are you going to put White at the 2? And LaVine at the 3? And bench Patrick Williams? I don't mind that. I'm not the biggest Patrick Williams fan in the world. He's not a bad player. He had a good rookie season. Worth the 4th overall pick? Probably not, but he was solid. Do you want him in the starting lineup, though? Probably not. I mean, I'll say this. I always thought that Kobe White would be better as a 2-guard. Even when he was coming into the league out of UNC, I had him as a 2-guard. I thought his passing could improve. There's no question that it improved from his rookie year to his sophomore year. But I don't think it's where you want it to be in a perfect world. Meanwhile, if you were to write down on a piece of paper what the ideal NBA point guard skill set is, it would be Lonzo Ball. Incredible vision, always looks for his teammates first, can get in the passing lanes, can score when he needs to. At first, this signing confused me when I first heard about it as I was walking to Yankee Stadium. But then I thought about it. Okay, if you move LaVine to the 3 and White to the 2, that can work. So this is a really good move for the Bulls. And Caruso coming off the bench? Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with reuniting Lonzo and Caruso. He's just a solid backup point guard. Does everything right. Plays a good, well-rounded game. Is he worth $9 million a year? In a perfect world, probably not. But if that's what the market decreed his value as, you can't get on the Bulls too much. The Cavaliers only made one big move in free agency. They signed Jarrett Allen to a 5-year deal worth $100 million. It's nice to see Allen get a big contract. Always liked him with the Nets. Was sorry to see him go to the Cavs in the James Harden deal. Was it worth it to get James Harden? Absolutely, but in a perfect world, Jarrett Allen would have stayed with the Nets. I don't mind the Cavs giving him $20 million a year. He's a really good young player. And who else are you going to use that cap space on. Do you see the Cavs being big players in free agency down the line? Do you see LeBron returning to the Cavs for a third tour of duty? I have no problem with what the Cavs did. I'm skeptical of the fit with Allen and Evan Mobley. I do not think those two can play together. Is it possible that Mobley turns into a solid three-point shooter? The answer is yes, but it's going to take a long time. You can't tell me that Jonathan Kuminga wouldn't be a better fit. Was Mobley the better player? The answer is yes, but I fear that Mobley may have been drafted by the wrong team. The Dallas Mavericks made some really big moves. They gave Tim Hardaway another 4-year contract worth $72 million. Just to be clear, that means that Tim Hardaway, in his NBA career, has made over $140 million. All due respect to Tim Hardaway Jr., but when his own father, a better player, makes just over $46 million in his career, you can't have the son get more than triple that throughout his NBA career. $18 million a year for Tim Hardaway Jr. God bless America. Look, he's a good player. He's a really good player. Him and Luka have done some really good things together. But in no way, shape, or form is he worth $18 million a year. Here's my question. Who was rushing to give Tim Hardaway Jr. that type of a contract? You couldn't wait it out a little bit? Wait for the contract to go down? I didn't like that for the Mavericks. The Mavericks did bring in another former Knick in Reggie Bullock on a 3-year deal worth $30 million. I'm not the biggest Bullock fan in the world. I understand that he plays good defense. I understand that he's a good three-point shooter. But I think you can do better than him. I'll say this. If you're going to have him come off the bench, I like that. I have no problem with Reggie Bullock coming off the bench. That's the perfect role for him, and he'll fill that role really, really well. If you're going to have him start, I don't like that. There are better players out there than Reggie Bullock. Sterling Brown is a good three-point shooter to have coming off the bench. You want to give him $3.1 million a year for the next 2 years. I'm okay with that. JJ Redick was a free agent anyway. So yeah, get younger. I have no problem with that. I have no problem bringing back Bobby. I will say this, you'll look at the Mavericks front court. That's pretty interesting. You've got Kristaps Porzingis, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber, Bobby, Moses Brown, and Willie Cauley-Stein. You think the Mavericks would be willing to trade Porzingis? Think about this starting five. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Kristaps Porzingis, and Blake Griffin. Durant can play the 4 and stretch the floor if need be. Same thing with Blake Griffin. Yeah, I still like my Porzingis trade. The Denver Nuggets also made some moves. They brought in Will Barton, JaMychal Green, Jeff Green, and Austin Rivers. I shouldn't say that they brought in Barton. They brought him back. And Barton was good for the Nuggets last year. Really good three-point shooter, played really good defense. He fits the Nuggets really well. Good job at bringing him back. And a good job of filling out that bench. What was the biggest issue that the Nuggets had? Spreading the wealth. Who's going to step up outside of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray? Now you take a look at the Nuggets' 10-man rotation. It's Jamal Murray and Monte Morris, with Facundo Campazzo there, waiting in the wings. Will Barton and Austin Rivers. Michael Porter Jr. and Jeff Green. Aaron Gordon and Paul Millsap. And Nikola Jokic and JaMychal Green. There are very few teams in the NBA that have a 10-man rotation better than that. The Nuggets are easily one of the big winners of this offseason. The Detroit Pistons made a few moves. They brought in Kelly Olynyk, Corey Joseph, and Trey Lyles. I like Kelly Olynyk. I wanted him on the Nets. I thought he fit that stretch 4 mold perfectly. But if the Pistons are going to give him $37 million, yeah, go to the Motor City. Bringing back Corey Joseph made sense. His game improved leaps and bounds when he got to the Pistons. The player that he was with the Kings versus the player that he was with the Pistons, it looked like a completely different player. Good job by the Pistons in bringing him back. And Trey Lyles is another good stretch 4. I thought the Nets could have gone after him. He's not the greatest player in the world, but he's solid. He'll hold his own. The thing that's kind of interesting to me is, where does this get the Pistons? What would have been a better use of their cap space? Bringing in a few veterans? Or using that cap space to take on bad contracts and get high picks as well? I got news for you. Even with Cade Cunningham, the Pistons aren't making the playoffs. I was confused by what the Pistons did. In a bubble, these are good moves. But when you broaden your outlook, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The Golden State Warriors only made one move, but it was a big one. They brought in Otto Porter Jr. on a 1-year minimum salary deal. I thought Porter would have fit the Nets really well. The Nets did sign him to a big offer sheet that the Wizards ended up matching. Was he worth that contract? Absolutely not, but Porter's a good player. I will say this, I'm a little confused as to how the Warriors are going to set up their frontcourt rotation. They have Kuminga. They brought in Nemanja Bjelica today. They have Draymond Green. They have Porter. They have Wiseman. There are just too many mouths to feed. People are hyping up the Warriors as a real title threat. They can certainly make the playoffs, but there are other teams in the West that I would take over them. I'm taking the 2 LA teams over them. I'm taking the Jazz over them. I'll take the Suns over them. I mean, once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. But the notion that the Warriors are title threats this year, no, I don't see that. The Rockets made a couple interesting moves. They brought in Daniel Tice on a sign and trade with the Bulls. And they brought back David Nwaba. I gotta say, these are 2 solid moves. Is Daniel Tice worth $9 million a year? In a perfect world, no, but if that's what the market sets his value as, c'est la vie. And David Nwaba plays the game the right way, really good defensively, does all the little things. I really liked him with the Nets. His injury was absolutely devastating to see. I'm glad that he's found a home in Houston. Look, the Rockets aren't going to be good next year by any stretch, but their roster does have some talented players on it. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to finish under 500, but I'll say this. Last year, the Rockets went 17-55. I'm going to say that the Rockets will win over 25 games this year. That's a step in the right direction. That's all you can ask for as a Rockets fan. The Pacers made a couple good moves. They brought back TJ McConnell, and they signed Torrey Craig. You sensing a theme? They're just filling out their roster. They're just filling out their depth. And I will say this, McConnell and Craig are very similar players. They're both defense-first players. McConnell can score. He had a career high in points per game last year. But McConnell's more valuable for what he does defensively. You take a look at that Pacers roster. It's got a lot of talent on it. And it has an elite coach now in Rick Carlisle. The Pacers will make the playoffs. The Eastern Conference is going to be a dogfight this year. Let's think about the teams in the East that have a chance of making the playoffs. The Hawks, the Celtics, the Nets, probably not the Hornets. I just think other teams in the East got better. The Bulls, definitely not the Cavaliers, definitely not the Pistons, the Pacers, the Heat, the Bucks, the Knicks. As much as that kills me to say, definitely not the Magic, the Sixers, not the Raptors, and the Wizards. That's 10 teams. That's it. That's your top 6 plus the 4 play-in teams. It's going to be very fun to watch. I'll say that. The Clippers only made one move, but it was an important one. They brought back Nicholas Batum on a 2-year deal worth $6.5 million. That's a great move for them. Batum resurrected his career with the Clippers after really falling off a cliff with the Hornets. He rediscovered his offensive game, played really well defensively. Bringing him back made a ton of sense. That brings us to the Lakers. You remember when LeBron James first joined the Lakers? A lot of veterans went there. JaVale McGee, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope re-signed with them. They brought in Reggie Bullock. They brought in Rajon Rondo, etc., etc. Same thing here. Trevor Ariza, Kent Bazemore, Wayne Ellington, and Dwight Howard all signed one-year deals with the Lakers on the minimum salary. It's impossible to dislike these moves. They're all good players. They'll all know their roles on the team. And what's interesting to note is all of these guys are previous Lakers. Ariza spent a little under a year and a half with the Lakers when he was younger. Kent Bazemore spent 23 games with the Lakers in his sophomore season. Wayne Ellington, the year before he went to the Nets, was a Laker. Dwight Howard was a Laker in 12-13 and 19-20. So these guys know that market. They know what it means to wear the purple and gold. They know what their expectations are. It's going to be to win the Lakers a title. The Lakers have a real chance of winning a title. I don't know if it's better than the Nets, but I'll say this. That series is going to be a dogfight. I've said this before. It has the potential to be one of the greatest NBA finals ever. Ariza's going to be a good 3-and-D guy. Bazemore's going to be a really good shooter. Same thing with Ellington. And Dwight Howard's going to be a bully inside. You've got to applaud Rob Pelinka for what he's done this offseason. He turned a Lakers team that really underwhelmed last year. Granted, because of injuries, but still, they were eliminated in the first round after winning the NBA title. Now they're back in the title discussion. They don't give up a ton for Russell Westbrook. They bring in 4 really good veterans. I don't know when the Nets and Lakers are going to play each other in the regular season, but those 2 games are going to be must-watch games. Clear your calendar. I'll skip over the Grizzlies. They didn't do anything. So that brings us to the Miami Heat. I don't know how Pat Riley does this, but every year, the Heat are players in free agency. I thought the salary cap was supposed to limit that. I get that there are exceptions, like the minimum salary, the mid-level. I get all that. But the Heat actually found room to sign Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker. They also brought back Duncan Robinson. The Heat are another one of the big winners in free agency. They got a lot better at point guard. Even though Kyle Lowry's 35 years old, he can still get the job done. He's one of those guys who peaked late. So you get the sense that his prime may last a little longer. And he's better than Goran Dragic, by far. It's not even close. I like Dragic, but Lowry's the better player. PJ Tucker's a really good 3-and-D guy. More D than 3, but still, he can get the job done on both ends. Gritty player, tough player, always defends the best guy on the opponent's team. Didn't do much against Durant, but no one can. And bringing back Duncan Robinson was something that the Heat needed to do. Is it an overpay? The answer is yes. The guy's getting $18 million a year, and he's just a three-point shooter. But he's a really good one, in fairness. I mean, last offseason, Joe Harris got a $70 million deal, so if he can get that, Duncan Robinson can get this. Granted, Robinson's contract is more, but still, the Harris contract kind of opened this up as a possibility. Great job by the Heat. You can't get upset at anything they did. They're going to be a tough team to play next year. No question about that. And they locked up Jimmy Butler, too. Job well done by the Heat. Feels like we say that every offseason. That brings us to the Milwaukee Bucks. They brought back Bobby Portis on a 2-year deal worth $9 million. And they brought in Semi Ojeleye. Portis had some big moments for the Bucks in the playoffs. I like that the Bucks brought him back. He'll be a good backup for him. And Ojeleye, I really like. I thought the Nets could have gone after him. Solid stretch 4. I'd like to see what he could do in more of an expanded role. I don't know if he's going to get that chance with the Bucks, but the Bucks added a really good player. I don't think anyone's expecting the Bucks to repeat as champions, but A, they don't need to, and B, they can still go on a big run. I'll skip over the Timberwolves. They didn't do anything. So that brings us to the 2 sign-in trades that the Pelicans did. They got Devontae Graham. They had to give up their first rounder next year, lottery protected. And in the sign-in trade with the Bulls for Alonzo Ball, they got Garrett Temple. And again, they got Tomas Satoransky. Satoransky was under contract, Temple wasn't. I'll say this. If you're going to lose Lonzo Ball, you could do a lot worse than replacing him with Devontae Graham. Graham's a really good player. Really good from beyond the arc. Solid defensively, sets up his teammates. He needs to work on his mid-range game. He needs to work on his penetrating. But that is something that can be taught. Graham's still 26. You can still teach him a few things. And Temple will be a solid backup. Can guard multiple positions. Solid scorer. Seems to get along with everyone. It's amazing how well traveled Temple is. This will be the 11th team that Temple's played for. In no particular order: Wizards, Kings, Nets, Bulls, Grizzlies, Clippers, Spurs, Hornets, Rockets, Bucks, Pelicans. Way to rack up those frequent flyer miles. Temple did sign a 3-year deal, though, so maybe he'll find a home in New Orleans. I'm not crazy about him signing a 3-year deal at the age of 35, but we don't know exactly how that contract is going to shake out. Maybe the final 2 years are non-guaranteed. The question is this good enough to get the Pelicans into the playoffs? Is it good enough to keep the band together? Zion, B.I., David Griffin. It's not impossible for the Pelicans to make the playoffs. Is it definitely going to happen? No, but they can make the playoffs. That brings us to the Knicks. They brought back a few guys Derrick Rose, Nerlens Noel, and Alec Burks. It was necessary to bring those guys back. Good job by Leon Rose. Then they turned heads by signing Evan Fournier to a 4-year deal worth $78 million. Now, I like Evan Fournier. I really do. But on no planet is he worth $19.5 million a year. This guy signed the 7th biggest contract in free agency. That is insane. I mean, Fournier's really good offensively, underrated defensively, and you took him away from the Celtics. I get that, but who was in a rush to give Evan Fournier $19.5 million per year? If that's what the market decreed his value to be, okay. I understand that. But I'm not sure if that's what happened. Maybe Leon Rose just jumped the gun a little bit. I understand that the Knicks had cap space. You kind of have to use it. The Knicks are past the point of using that cap space for bad contracts and draft picks. No, they made the playoffs last year. They've got to build on that. Fournier will help them do that. This is just an odd signing. I like the Knicks roster. It makes sense. They've got good depth. They kept Derrick Rose, which was really important. I'd say that this is another offseason that the Knicks didn't sign a star in free agency because Evan Fournier is not a star. But there were no stars worth giving that contract to. See, here's my question. Are the Knicks done? They probably are, right? So with that being said, did they address their biggest need at point guard? Is Derrick Rose going to start? Is that what you're telling me? If that's what you're telling me, okay. I have no problem with that. But realize, Rose came off the bench last year. Do we know how Rose is going to do in a starting role? Playing 30 minutes a game? I don't think we do. Interesting decision by Leon Rose. Who I do like, by the way. I didn't like the hire at first, but he's proven me wrong. So I guess I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. The Thunder made a couple moves. They brought back Mike Muscala on a 2-year deal worth $7 million, and they signed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to a max contract extension. Fine moves. I have no problem with it. Muscala is a good stretch center. Very offense-oriented, doesn't play a lot of defense, not a good rebounder. But he scores. There's a role for him in the league. And they had to sign Shai to a max contract. You can't get upset about it. The Thunder won't make any noise this year, but they did what they had to do in free agency, so you can't get upset at it. I'll skip over the Magic. They did literally nothing. The 76ers brought back Furkan Korkmaz on a 3-year deal worth $15 million. He's a good player. He's turned into a really good shooter. He's young. He's 24. He fits what the Sixers need. Good move. That brings us to the Phoenix Suns. The Suns are another one of the winners of free agency. They brought back Chris Paul on a 4-year deal worth $120 million. You want to tell me the 4 years is too much to give him? Something tells me that Paul is going to stay good for as long as he decides to play basketball. I don't mind it. The Suns had to bring him back, okay? We know that. It was a match made in heaven. In addition to that, the Suns brought back Cameron Payne on a 3-year deal worth $19 million, and they brought in JaVale McGee on a 1-year deal worth $5 million. To get Cameron Payne for just over $6 million a year is an incredible move by James Jones. That's the best signing of the offseason, by far. It's not even close. You get an invaluable sixth man. Someone who played a big role for you in the postseason, really stepped his game up. For just over $6 million a year? There were rumblings that this guy would get a huge offer from a point guard needy team. And he'd be their starter. Now he's coming off the bench? For just over $6 million a year? That's the best signing of the offseason. Whatever happens from here on out, nothing will beat that. And bringing in JaVale McGee, if you were to write down on a piece of paper what the Suns really needed, it would look a lot like JaVale McGee. Laugh about him all you want. But he's a good rebounder, very good defensively. Yes, he has a lot of brain cramps. Yes, he's the Shaqtin' a Fool MVP. Yes, it boggles your mind how this guy is an Olympian and has won 3 NBA titles. I'm not kidding. He actually has 3 rings. 17, 18, and 20. But he fits what the Suns needed. All due respect to Frank Kaminsky, but when the Suns really needed him to step up, he didn't. JaVale McGee will step up when called upon. Will the Suns make it back to the NBA Finals? No, but they had a great offseason. No question about that. The Trailblazers made a couple minor moves. They brought in Cody Zeller and Ben McLemore to shore up their bench. Okay, I have no problem with that. They're both solid players. Zeller's better than McLemore, but if you wanted to add a little shooting, sure, bring in McLemore, I don't mind it. You needed a backup shooting guard anyway. The big story in Portland was re-signing Norman Powell to a 5-year deal worth $90 million. This kind of turned some heads when it was first announced. I actually liked it. I had no problem with it. Norman Powell's worth $18 million a year. Absolutely. In fact, he's probably worth a little more than that. His game has really stepped up the past couple years. He's shown what he can do in an expanded role. Excellent shooter. His defense has gotten a lot better. Damian Lillard has intimated that he really wants his supporting cast to step up. You have McCollum, and you have Powell. All you need is to improve the front court. Good job by the Blazers. The Kings made a couple big moves. They brought back Rashawn Holmes on a 4-year deal worth $47 million. They brought back Mo Harkless on a 2-year deal worth $9 million. And they brought back Alex Len on a 2-year deal worth $7.65 million. They're good moves. You can't get mad at it. Holmes really stepped his game up since going to the Kings. He proved that he belongs in this league. Double-double threat every night. Yeah, I have no problem with bringing him back. Mo Harkless is a solid backup. I know that he was starting for the Kings. In a perfect world, he wouldn't start. But he signed him to a reasonable contract. 2 years, $9 million. You'll make it work. It'll be fine. Alex Len is a solid backup center. Not great, not terrible. I'm not sure why you went after him since you traded for Tristan Thompson. But Len's a solid player. So good job in bringing back Holmes and Harkless. I don't think Len makes a lot of sense, but that's nothing against Len. That's just a typical confusing Kings move. The Spurs made a couple big signings. They brought in Doug McDermott on a 3-year deal worth $42 million. And Zach Collins to a 3-year deal worth $22 million. They're both good players. McDermott's all offense, no defense. He should help replace DeMar DeRozan if he signs elsewhere. And Zach Collins obviously has injury concerns. He's only played 11 games since the 1920 season. But when healthy, he's a solid player. The Spurs added a couple offense-first guys here. They were not a good offensive team last year. They only put up 111.1 points per game. That's the 20th best mark in the league. That's bad. That had to get better. The defense needs to get better too. The defense wasn't much better. It was just 19th best in the league. But if you really wanted to improve your offense, if you're Greg Popovich, sure. Go for it. I have no problem with that. The Raptors only made one big move yesterday. They brought back Gary Trent Jr. on a 3-year deal worth $54 million. I like Trent. I always liked him. I like that last year he really got a chance to show what he could do. He started more than he came off the bench. He proved that he can score. His defense was really good, got into the passing lanes. Maybe $18 million is a little steep for a guy with only one really good year under his belt. But if Norman Powell got $18 million a year, it's hard to not give Trent $18 million a year. The Jazz re-signed Mike Conley to a 3-year deal worth $68 million. They absolutely had to. Conley had one of his best seasons ever last year. He made the All-Star team for the first time. It's kind of interesting to think about how different that series would have been against the Clippers if Conley played in more than one game. Do the Jazz advance? If they advance, are we talking more seriously about the possibility of Kawhi Leonard leaving the Clippers? It's kind of interesting how things like that work out. That brings us to the Washington Wizards, who signed Spencer Dinwiddie to a 3-year deal worth $60 million. This will be in a sign and trade. The Nets will get something back, whether it's players, whether it's a pick and a trade exception. God only knows. But the Nets aren't losing Dinwiddie for nothing. That's important to note. I know that I called for the Wizards to blow things up after they traded Westbrook. But I'll say this. I understand the logic. I understand wanting to try to make the playoffs, and once you get there, a million things can happen. I mean, I can't begrudge a team for trying to win. The thing is, though, and this really isn't the Wizards' fault, this is the NBA's fault. It's better to miss the playoffs than it is to be a middling playoff team. A team that's going to make the playoffs just to then get bounced in the first round. You're just stuck in purgatory there. You're never going to get a high pick. So your chances of landing a superstar are drastically lower. Odds are you're not going to have the flexibility to make moves in free agency. You'll want to keep the guys around that got you to the playoffs. So good luck being big players in free agency. Trades are always a possibility, but it takes two to tango. And you have to evaluate how much better that trade makes you. Is it worth going all in just to improve your roster to the point that you may get eliminated in the second round? It's tough. You can't tell me that it wouldn't be better for the Wizards in the long run to have blown things up. Because you're not going to win anything with Bradley Beal and Spencer Dinwiddie. I like the idea of those two guys playing together. Dinwiddie's the second best Wizard. He'll help Beal a lot. Beal will help him a lot. I wish Dinwiddie nothing but the best in DC. But now you're just going to be bounced in the first round again. Maybe the series will be more competitive. I don't know. The Wizards are just in purgatory. Keep this in mind. Bradley Beal has never played in an Eastern Conference Finals. The last time the Wizards were in the conference finals, they were the Washington Bullets. It was in 1979. Does bringing in Dinwiddie get the Wizards any closer towards breaking that over 40-year drought? The answer is no. He's a really good player. The Wizards will be a decent team. They'll make the playoffs. Maybe they'll get bounced in the play-in tournament. I don't know. Maybe they'll have a decent first-round series. I don't know. But you can't tell me that it wouldn't be in the Wizards' best interest to blow things up. They better thank their lucky stars that they have a guy like Bradley Beal, with the patience of a saint and the scoring touch of Wilt Chamberlain. So that's going to do it for today. You are going to get another one of these shows tomorrow. Certainly a lot to talk about with my beloved Nets, Bruce Brown, James Johnson, and Patty Mills. That was made official. Patty Mills is a Brooklyn Net. I'll get more into it tomorrow. Until then, I am Jacob Valk. And always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.